In 1886, Robert Bosch founded the Workshop for Precision Mechanics and Electrical Engineering in Stuttgart. This was the birth of today's globally operating company. Right from the start, it was characterized by innovative strength and social commitment. Bosch's core operating areas are spread across 4 business sectors: mobility, including hardware and software; consumer goods, including household appliances and power tools; industrial technology, including drive and control; and energy and building technology. Today, when we hear the name Bosch, we think of great German quality products. The history of the company started in a backyard in western Stuttgart as the Workshop for Precision Mechanics and Electrical Engineering in November 1886. 1 year later, Bosch presented the first low-voltage magneto for gas engines. From 1897, Bosch started installing better designed magneto ignition devices into automobiles and became the only supplier of a truly reliable ignition system within the industry. In 1902, the chief engineer at Bosch, Gottlieb Honnold, unveiled the high-voltage magneto ignition system with a spark plug. This product paved the way for Bosch to become a leading automotive supplier. The first factory was opened by Bosch in Stuttgart in 1901. In 1906, the company produced its 100,000th magneto. In the same year, Bosch introduced the 8-hour day for workers. In 1910, the Feuerbach plant was founded and built close to Stuttgart. In this factory, Bosch started to produce headlights in 1913. When the First World War broke out in 1914, Bosch was forced to convert its entire production facilities to meet the needs of the military. However, as Robert Bosch did not wish to profit from the war and the suffering it brought, he donated the profits generated from armaments contracts, some 20 million German marks, to charitable causes. Despite the extremely difficult conditions, the company recovered from the consequences of the war. Particularly the expropriation of large parts of its interests outside Germany, surprisingly quickly. By around 1925, the network of international sales offices was already larger than it had been in 1914. 1917 was a very important year for the company and for history. Bosch was transformed into a corporation. In 1926, Bosch started to produce windshield wipers, and in 1927 injection pumps for diesel engines. In the year 1932, the company developed its first power drill and presented its first car radio. As early as the end of 1933, negotiations between Robert Bosch and the National Socialists began on relocating parts of armaments production to the interior of Germany. Bosch founded 2 such alternative plants in 1935 and 1937. Both plants were used exclusively for armaments production. These were known as shadow factories and were built under great secrecy and in close cooperation with the Nazi authorities. In 1937, Bosch AG became a limited liability company, which is a business structure that can combine the pass-through taxation of a partnership with the limited liability of a corporation. The Bosch subsidiary Dreilinden Maschinenbau near Berlin employed nearly 5,000 people, more than half of whom were forced laborers, prisoners of war, and female concentration camp prisoners, including many women from the Warsaw Uprising. They had to produce accessories for German Luftwaffe aircraft. In Hildesheim, a secret plant for the entire electrical equipment of tanks, tractors, and trucks of the Wehrmacht was built. In 1944, 4,290 men and women worked in the Trilke factory, more than 2,000 of whom were forced laborers, prisoners of war, and military internees. During the Second World War, a total of 2,711 people who had been deported to Germany from the occupied countries had to work at the Bosch plant in Hildesheim. In the last years of the war, no new German tank ever drove without the starter elements from the Bosch factory in Hildesheim. Bosch also had a monopoly position in the outfitting of German Luftwaffe aircraft. During the war, production was further decentralized. Bosch produced in an ever larger number of factories and relocated parts of its production to 213 plants in more than 100 locations. To ensure that the company remained in family ownership, Robert Bosch changed the company from an AG public limited company to a GmbH private limited company in 1937. The following year, 4 years before his death, he wrote his will. By the end of the war in 1945, large areas of the Bosch plants had been razed to the ground as a result of Allied air raids. Robert Bosch did not live to see the destruction, dying on March 12, 1942, aged 80 years old. In 1945, despite the extremely difficult conditions, Bosch was able to build on its early successes surprisingly quickly. After the currency reform in Germany in 1948, the company enjoyed a period of rapid growth. This growth was at first very fragile as a result of the decartelization program pursued by the victorious Allied forces. The feared dismantling of the whole company and loss of most of its subsidiaries was nonetheless averted in 1952. However, Bosch had to make its patents and industrial designs available to competitors. All the sales offices and production production facilities outside Germany, however, remained expropriated, as after the First World War, the company had to start again from scratch on the international stage. Nonetheless, the network of sales offices and customer service centers covered over 130 countries again as early as 1956. At this time, Bosch focused increasingly on setting up local production facilities. During the 1950s, for example, production started in India, Australia, and Brazil. Although Bosch focused primarily on automotive technology in the first years after the war, the company soon broadened its product range again to include refrigerators, radios, heaters, and power tools. Blaupunkt introduced the first car radio in Europe in 1952. The launch of the Bosch Combi that same year marked a turning point in the company's power tools business as it reached out to the new target group of do-it-yourself enthusiasts. In the area of automotive technology, Bosch initially re-established the technology at pre-war levels, while engineers worked flat out to develop new pioneering technology. The mechanical gasoline injection system for passenger cars was taken into serious production in 1951. The first semiconductors to be installed in a car, called variodes, represented a further milestone in the company history. In 1964, the executors of Robert Bosch's will laid the foundation for today's corporate constitution. The Robert Bosch Foundation acquired the majority of the capital stock of Robert Bosch from the heirs of the estate in 1964, transferring the voting rights to today's Robert Bosch Industrial Trust, the body responsible for carrying out the company's entrepreneurial ownership functions since then. In 1969, the Bosch Foundation changed its name to Robert Bosch Stiftung, GmbH, Robert Bosch Foundation, to underline the social focus of its activities. To this day, the foundation supports projects in the areas of education, health, international relations, society, culture, and science. The Robert Bosch Foundation currently holds 92% of the share capital of the multinational company. Most of the remaining shares are held by the Bosch family, which is about 7%. This corporate constitution continues to play a key role in securing the entrepreneurial freedom and financial independence of the Bosch Group. Most of the earnings generated remain within the company, where they're used to secure its future. This allows the company to plan over the long term and to invest heavily in the future without borrowing from the capital markets. Robert Bosch Stiftung is paying a dividend, allowing the body to sustain its commitment to charitable causes. The fall of the Iron Curtain also heralded a new era for Bosch. Access to the markets in Eastern Europe and Asia in particular accelerated the pace of globalization, a process by which previously distinct regional markets started to intermesh worldwide. Bosch was now faced with the task of meeting these new challenges and grasping the opportunities that arose. The share of sales generated outside Germany rose from 51% in 1990 to around 76% in 2009. That's all for today. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.